Hey guys, I'm Bhavatarani, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Unaided Program, National College, Trichy. So, in this video, we're going to see about the age of Shakespeare verse, which is from 1558 to 1625. We can also call it as the Shakespearean age. This age, that is the age of Shakespeare, includes the whole period extending from the accession of Elizabeth in 1558 to the death of James I in 1625. These 67 years are divided into three sections. The first one is first 21 years of Queen Elizabeth's reign, and the second section is the 24 years between the publication of Spencer's Shepherd's Calendar and the Queen's death. And the final section is the 22 years of James I's rule. The first part is known as the time of preparation or springtide in Elizabethan literature. The second is known as the time of full fruition or summer. And the third section is known as the time of decline or autumn. Of course, the name Elizabethan should only be applied to the first two divisions, whereas Jacobean is the right title for the third one. However, from the standpoint of literary growth, there are compelling reasons why the Elizabethan and Jacobean periods should also be included in the broad term, the age of Shakespeare. Thus, this period is known as the Golden Age of Literature. It was a time of peace, economic success, stability, liberty, and tremendous discoveries. It was a time of both reflection and action. It was a period notable for the remarkable development of art, literature, and drama. We may take the publication of Spencer Shepherd's Calendar in 1579 as marking the opening of the golden age of Elizabethan literature. In the first half of the Queen's reign, while there was a good deal of poetic activity, little verse of any distinct value was produced. By far the best poetry of the period is to be found in the contribution of Thomas Sackville and Lord Buckhurst to an extensive undertaking entitled A Mirror for Magistrates. The noble but somber induction in particular is worthy of attention as the finest single poem written in England between Chaucer and Spenser. The Steel Glass of 1576 of George Gascoigne possesses some interest as the first regular verse satire in the English language. Moving to Spenser and his poetry, Edmund Spenser, the greatest non dramatic poet of an age which found its most natural literary expression in the drama, was born in London in 1552 and educated at the Merchant Taylor School at Cambridge, where he read the classics in Italian literature and came under the influence of the strong Protestant spirit which then pervaded the university. After a couple of years spent with relatives in Lancashire, he found a place in the household of the Earl of Leicester, with whose nephew, Sir Philip Sidney, he formed an intimate friendship. In 1580, he went to Ireland as secretary to the new Lord Deputy, Lord Grady Wilton. The remainder of his life, save for brief visits to London, was passed in Ireland in miserable exile among a lawless people whom he loathed. Again and again disappointed in every effort to secure a position at the court, and with this the means of returning to England, he found his only relief in the writing of his Faerie Queene. In October 1598, a rebellion broke out in Tyrone, where he was then living. His castle was fired and plundered by an infuriated mob. He and his family barely escaped with their lives. In failing health and crushed in spirits, he reached London at the end of the year, and on 16th January 1599, he died in an inn at Westminster. While Spenser's fame rests mainly on the Faerie Queene, his minor poetry, which is voluminous, would itself have sufficed to assure him the place of preeminence among contemporary English poets, and the Faerie Queene is considered to be the longest as well as one of the greatest English poems. His Shepherd's Calendar, which was written in 1579, is a pastoral poem of the artificial kind, which the taste for everything classic which came in with the revival of learning had made popular in all European literature, and in it Spenser follows the models set by the late Greek poet Theocritus by Virgil in his Bucolica, and by French and Italian writers of the Renaissance who had imitated these. It is divided into 12 parts, one for each month of the year, and in it, under the guise of conventional pastoral imagery, that is, of shepherds talking and singing, the poet writes of his unfortunate love for a certain mysterious Rosalind, deals with sundry moral questions, and discusses the religious issues of the day from the standpoint of strong Protestantism. Such conventional pastoral imagery was again used in Astrophel, which was written in 1586, an elegy on the death of Sidney, to whom the calendar had been dedicated. His four hymns in honor of love and beauty show his wonderful power of melodious verse. His Amorati, a series of 88 sonnets, described the process of his love for Elizabeth Boyle, whom he married in 1594. That event inspired his Epithalamion, the finest of all his minor poems, and by common consent, the noblest wedding hymn in the language. We have spoken of the Jacobean division of the age of Shakespeare as a period of decline. By this we mean that the Elizabethan inspiration was now waning, that its subject matter was getting exhausted, and that a tendency to imitation was setting in among the rising generation. Meanwhile, a new kind of poetry was beginning with John Donne (1573 to 1631), whose work belongs essentially to the time of James, though he was 30 years old when Elizabeth died. Donne, who was celebrated divine and preacher, wrote songs, sonnets, marriage poems, elegies, and satires, all of which are characterized by much genuine poetic feeling, harsh meters, and those strained and whimsical images and turns of speech which are called conceits. His historical importance lies in the fact that he initiated the metaphysical school of poetry, of which we shall have something more to say presently.